For a number of reasons, I probably find DreamWorks to be the most interesting out of the mainstream big-budget animation studios. I think they have an interesting place in animation history, being one of the first studios to really prove that Disney Pixar didn't have the monopoly on Western theatrical animation. I find it interesting how much of a game changer their movies were, popularizing the use of a somewhat edgier tone, jukebox soundtracks, dance party endings, as well as many more of the tropes and trends with animated movies that are both praised and criticized to this day. They were among the first animation studios to regularly produce sequels to their previous movies and actually make it work, often surpassing the originals in both success and quality. For better or for worse, the animated film scene was never the same after they rose to prominence. What I find most interesting, though, is the sheer variety within their filmography, not just in genre and style, but also in quality. With most other animation studios, especially other titans like Disney and Pixar, I feel like the style and quality of their movies come in trends. For instance, for me, pretty much all of Pixar's duds come from the 2010s onwards, when nearly everything they produced was an obligatory feeling sequel, or follow-up of some kind, and there was even a possible meta-explanation for it, with this change in their output quality starting relatively soon after their merge with Disney. With DreamWorks, on the other hand, they can produce something utterly fantastic and also produce one of the worst animated movies of that year within a couple of months of one another, and since pretty much the start, that's just felt like a regular occurrence. And even after also having a merger themselves back in 2016, so far it's pretty much gone unchanged. For example, in the year 2004, they released two movies. One of those movies was Shrek 2, which serves as a pretty quintessential example of DreamWorks at their best. It's a sequel which expands on the previous entry, is considered by many, myself included, to surpass the original in quality, and it makes use of many of the tropes the studio popularized, but in ways that work. The other was Shark Tale, which is awful beyond belief. To put it into perspective, imagine if Disney released The Lion King and Chicken Little within the span of 6 months, and then they got nominated alongside each other for Best Animated Feature. I don't know if it's DreamWorks' most universally hated movie, considering gems like The Boss Baby exist, but it's certainly gotten to the point where continuing to bash this movie isn't really like beating a dead horse, so much as it's like beating the charred remains of a horse that's already been beat, stabbed, shot up, and repeatedly nuked. However, I'm currently in the process of updating my DreamWorks ranking, and I decided to revisit this one, just to see if it really was that bad. So that's pretty much why this video exists, just to make that excursion less of a wasted effort. Like, of course it's that bad. I knew it was that bad. Did I really need to go back and check? But I took the time to go through the whole thing and take thorough notes on it, so might as well put those to use. Part 1. DreamWorks on Autopilot. Back in the day, DreamWorks seemed to have a relatively simple business model, that being, look over at what Disney and Pixar are doing, and then just do that. Sometimes this took the form of making movies where, while there isn't a one-to-one comparison with any particular Disney movie, they would likely appeal to a pretty similar demographic. Musical epics, historical, semi-fantastical settings, fun animal friends, etc. At other times, this took the form of more directly copying them. Pixar makes a movie about ants and communism, DreamWorks makes a movie about ants and communism. Disney makes a pirate treasure hunting adventure movie with 2D and 3D hybrid animation. DreamWorks makes a pirate treasure hunting adventure movie with 2D and 3D hybrid animation. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there is no hard evidence to suggest that these DreamWorks movies were only made when they were because Disney released a movie with a similar concept shortly beforehand, but I think you can only call it a coincidence so many times, especially when one of DreamWorks' founders is a notoriously petty individual who had personal beef with Disney and their, at the time, CEO. In the case of Shark Tale, I personally do not believe that it would have been set underwater and had fish as the main characters if Finding Nemo hadn't come out the previous year. Even more so because, aside from the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, which, strangely enough, also came out at a very similar point in time, how many big-budget animated movies about fish can you even name? I wouldn't be surprised if the process of greenlighting this movie was literally just, oh, a little birdie told me that over at Pixar, they're working on a movie set in the ocean with fish as the main characters. we need to get something like that out quickly while movies about sea creatures are on people's minds, so let's take this random throwaway script we had lying around and put a bunch of fish into it. And then they just switched on the autopilot from there. Because the underwater setting really has absolutely no bearing on anything in this movie. It's just New York with an ugly green hue over the top of it. The plot is just a generic crime comedy that could be set anywhere. The characters all move like humans, talk like humans, have the same jobs and day-to-day activities that humans do. The effort to take advantage of the underwater setting doesn't really go any further than a bunch of word swapping, or an occasional pun. In fact, if anything, the setting is actively detrimental to the movie. Not only because a lot of the jokes and plot points and lines in whatever throwaway script they probably reworked this from just do not translate.
Snap it! Oscar. You're not snapping it! Oscar! Oh, hey, don't sweat it, Sykes. A lot of white fish can't do it, man.
Oscar, would you just sit down, okay? Ooh.
Like, what's the implication here? Is he a black fish? An African-American fish? But also because of the character design. As far as big budget animation goes, it might be on the same level as Open Season in terms of awfulness. Now, fish are very, very different animals from humans. This makes them quite difficult to anthropomorphize. This is why most media that tries either takes the same approach as Finding Nemo, give them more expressive eyes and mouths, but otherwise leave their anatomy relatively unchanged, or the same approach as SpongeBob SquarePants, where the characters are mostly simple shapes, with a few small features to identify them as fish. However, the SpongeBob approach probably wouldn't work that well in 3D, and for the Finding Nemo approach, you would have to put a bit of extra thought into how the characters move, rather than just having them move like humans, so I'm assuming that's why we got these Uncanny Valley fish-human hybrids. They barely even use the underwater setting to try and be funny, and whenever they do, it's just, oh, how did that plot point happen? Aren't we supposed to be underwater? Basically just lazily acknowledging that the setting does absolutely nothing to help the movie. The humor, more than anything else, feels like it's just DreamWorks on autopilot. It's superficially similar to some of their good movies. Shrek also referenced pop culture a bunch, and was a bit crude and edgy at times. I guess the difference with Shrek is that, in addition to this not being the only source of humor, in those movies these elements tended to be at the service of jokes, or at the very least are still moving the plot forward somehow. Like that WWE scene in Shrek. In addition to being a reference, it's also a fun comedic fight scene on its own, and serves as the reason Shrek gets sent on the quest to rescue Fiona. In Shark Tale, when they play a pop song, or say the name of a movie, or real-life brand, or have a character fart, or say something sexual, that, in and of itself, is the joke. In one of the worst examples, possibly in anything, honestly, let alone Shark Tale, there's a scene going on, these characters are reciting boring, exposition-heavy dialogue, they're not even really trying to be funny, and then everything comes to a screeching halt so they can play Baby's Got Back for a second.
Hey boss, big butts!
There is nothing about this scene that anyone could possibly find funny on its own. They just took a pre-existing song that has the word butt in it, played it for a few seconds, and then the scene just continues on as if that didn't happen. So, it's an animated movie where the animation looks really ugly. It's a movie set underwater where there is absolutely no purpose to it being set underwater. It's a comedy that isn't funny. So, that leaves me with a question. I am going to ask about Shark Tale, a question that I ask about many mediocre and bad movies, though in this case it might be a little more fitting than usual. That question being, what's the hook? What am I, the viewer, supposed to actually latch onto in this movie? I feel like most movies that I like have at least one obvious singularity that I connect with and serves as the main focal point for why I'm watching the movie, and that most movies in general at least attempt to have something like this. A protagonist who makes interesting decisions, a pairing or group of characters that bounce off one another really well. And no, a premise isn't really enough. You can have the best premise of all time, but if the main character or main group of characters don't choose to do anything interesting with the scenario they're placed into, then it doesn't really mean anything. So, the premise of Shark Tale is that a guy suddenly gains a bunch of fame for something he didn't actually do, and the intended focal point is the exploits and relationships of this main character, Oscar. Well, Part 2. Oscar sucks. Oscar has to be one of the worst protagonists, period. He doesn't have any fun dynamics with any other character. I'm gonna be using the words supposed and supposed a lot throughout the rest of this review because I feel like I have to clarify that I'm talking about things the movie is insisting, rather than things the movie has actually sold me on. One of the main relationships in the movie is his supposed partnership/friendship with this shark. Thing is, I don't know if there's a single scene where these two characters actually enjoy each other's company or even work that well together. Oscar actively does not want to work with Lenny, and only winds up letting him in on the scheme because Lenny blackmails him, and then they just spend the rest of the movie bickering with each other. Is there any point where these two characters that the movie is trying to imply are friends actually act like friends? The only bit I can think of is that brief scene where they're celebrating after fooling everyone with their performance, but it's not really meant to be endearing in that instance because the main focus of the scene is on how they're ignoring Angie. Speaking of, that's Oscar's other main relationship in this movie. Once again, the movie insists to us that there's supposed to be a mutual friendship there, and this time we're also told that she secretly likes him romantically, but this isn't justified by anything we actually see happening on screen. I don't think we get a very good idea of why Angie likes him, considering he spends the entire movie blowing her off and not taking her seriously. And just like with Lenny, once she's in on the scheme, all the pair of them do is bicker. No one in this movie actually likes one another, or is given any reason to want to be paired up with these other characters. Everyone constantly has to be tricked, or nagged, or blackmailed into working together. It's not like Oscar makes interesting decisions on his own, either. He makes the same decision, over and over. In any given scenario, just think of the most obvious, selfish, and stupid thing he could possibly do, and that's what he does, every single time. Is he going to use the money his supposed best friend gave him to pay off his debts? Nope, he gambles it all away. Is he going to tread carefully after suddenly amassing a bunch of fame for something he didn't actually do? No, he takes sponsorships, flaunts his accomplishment everywhere, becomes somehow even more self-centered than he was already. Is he going to reject the girl who's hot? I mean, I think that was the intention with her design, but has made it really clear that she's only interested in him because he's rich and famous. Of course not, he just lets her use him because I guess having a hot girlfriend boosts his status. After the others help him rescue his, again, supposed best friend and now love interest from the villains, is he going to just get them out of there while they have the upper hand? No, he's going to waste a bunch of time bragging and flexing some more just for the sake of boosting his own massive ego. That last one is after the movie tries to tell us he's improved as a person, by the way. There are very few choices he makes where his logic doesn't simply boil down to, doing this will make me rich and or famous. One of the few examples is when he initially takes credit for killing the shark. It's not just for the notoriety, in that case, it's also out of self-defense. You see, Oscar was in debt to the mob. He was about to be whacked for failing to pay back those debts, but when he takes credit for killing the shark, it gets them to back off. However, they do absolutely nothing with this. The movie continues on as if he did take the credit just for the fame, and after it's all revealed to be a lie, not only do the mob characters not really seem to care, the guy who initially tried to have him whacked gives him a promotion at his job? What? Same with the general masses in the movie. Everyone who believed his story is just cheering him on when he reveals it was all a lie. I thought the whole point of a story where a character builds up their status on lies is that generally people aren't too happy when they find out they've been lied to. But not in the Shark Tale universe, apparently. Everyone's just cool with it. Following this protagonist is like just watching a simple AI hit a dopamine button over and over, and all that happens as a result is he gets dopamine, because at no point in the movie does he ever have to face any real repercussions or change anything about his behavior. He bumbles his way through the whole movie, and at the end, characters he did nothing but piss off or screw over, or both, inexplicably decide to reward him for being stupid. What is supposed to be engaging about that? Take something like Over the Hedge, another DreamWorks movie with some superficial similarities to Shark Tale. In that movie, the main character is also a selfish asshole who lies for his own personal gain. But here, you actually buy that he's befriending the other characters because they're shown in many scenes to be enjoying each other's company and working well together. The dumb decisions he makes actually come back to bite him in the end, and after the lie is revealed, he actually has to earn the other characters' trust again by risking his life to save them. Like, it's not perfect in execution, but there's some logic behind the way the characters act. Like many animated movies, Shark Tale ends with a dance party, and it is the absolute worst kind of dance party ending. I don't know if it's quite as bad as the one in Horton Hears a Who, but it's down there. There was nothing about that ending that suggested these characters all being cool with each other was a logical way for things to turn out. Oscar is still a liar who took advantage of everyone. Many of these other characters are murderers or attempted murderers. The few characters who aren't actively horrible people didn't get anything out of this whole scenario except a bunch of undesirable near-death experiences. But look! They're all dancing and smiling, so I guess that's just the end of the movie. They took what is supposed to be a piece of visual shorthand and used it in place of any character having an actual arc. Is Shark Tale the worst movie that DreamWorks has ever made? I don't know if I could say that definitively. There are several other movies they've made that I might dislike more. But I think there is a reason why this one has remained relevant to the conversation, despite being done to death already, and is still kind of seen as the quintessential bad DreamWorks movie. It is fascinatingly awful. I mean, compare it to something like the Trolls movies, where my opinion basically boils down to, well, it's just a bunch of annoying pop song covers, and also James Corden is in it. Shark Tale, though, I could talk about it. There was a conversation to be had about why this movie just doesn't work on any level. The full updated version of my DreamWorks rankings should be coming pretty soon, so be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, maybe support the channel by watching some of my other videos or hitting the join button and becoming a member. Thanks for watching, goodbye.